Thanks for joining us today. I've got a guest who is going to talk about all the things that he's learned in the last 18 months since getting psoriatic arthritis. He's a very interesting guy and he posts some really, really fascinating content inside our rheumatoid support platform. And I invited him onto our podcast so that he could share some of these really interesting insights with all of us. So, g'day, Richard, all the way from Melbourne, but here today visiting Sydney. How are you?
We're in the same town, Clint, in the same city today.
We are. Yeah. So you'd think our internet connection would be better, but we've managed to work it out, haven't we?
We have, yeah. After a bit of toing and froing, I think we're okay.
Mate, thanks for coming on this. You know, we talked about how this could be interesting for others because you are a tester. You like testing things, finding what works and what doesn't. And you've tested a lot of stuff in the last 18 months. You've got you're self-employed. You run a couple of businesses and stuff. You sort of have a logical, problem-solving kind of male mind, and I think that lends itself well to trying to troubleshoot your way through a challenging health condition. So, why don't you tell us what your sort of diagnosis looked like when it happened, and then just get started and start sharing with us things you've tried, things you've learned throughout this journey.
So when I landed on your stuff, Clint, I thought I'm made for this particular program. I was vegan for a couple of years before my arthritic diagnosis, and I was doing Bikram yoga every morning at 6 a.m. for about 3 years before that as well. So I think I was doing everything right, and then I got it. I guess just in the shortest possible time frame possible to explain what happened to me. I was, as I said, I was doing a 6 a.m. Bikram class 5 mornings a week, very consistently. I'd hardly ever miss. And one day I turned up and my knee stopped bending, and I'm like, what's going on here? Completely out of the blue. I've heard countless people on your podcast tell a similar story. You think it must be some sort of injury, and it'll go away in a couple of days, and a couple of days turn into a couple of weeks, and probably about 6 weeks later, it wasn't getting any better. So I booked an appointment at the sports doctor, who took a look at it and did what he needed to do, MRIs, blood tests, and got the results back. And he said, I think you need to go and see a rheumatologist. And I said, that's interesting. What does that mean? He said, you might have arthritis. And I'm like, no, I don't have arthritis. there's no way I have arthritis. Like, I'm young, I'm fit, I'm healthy. I don't have arthritis. And he's like, well, let's see. So he gave me a couple of referrals or like a couple of recommendations. I said, I want to see the best doctor in Melbourne. And he wrote down a couple of names, and he said, well, go and see this guy. I won't mention this guy's name. So I went and saw him, and he confirmed that he wrote down on the list it was somewhere between psoriatic, ankylosing spondylitis, inflammatory arthritis. He didn't put it into the rheumatoid category. But he certainly said that it's one of these inflammatory arthritises. And I said, what does this mean? Like, I was very much like really in the dark with it all. And he pointed to his filing cabinet behind me. He said, I got 28 medications in there. We start at the bottom and we work our way up till we find the one that works for you. And I'm like, whoa, that's pretty full on. Like, what do I, can I do anything else? Like, can I heal naturally? And by this point I'm always experimenting with stuff, as you alluded to at the start of the podcast. I'm always like looking for alternative therapies and different ways to challenge myself and, help my body in natural ways. I was very much into that. And he said, no, there's really nothing you can do. The medications is it. And I said, oh, what about my diet? By this point, I've been vegan for a couple of years, and I was binging on Dr. Michael Greger and Dr. Clapper and all these amazing, plant-based doctors, and listening. I've been like I wouldn't say studying, because I don't take in all the information and able to regurgitate it, but like I was really processing all that information for probably a year or two before this diagnosis. So I really did understand by this point that diet plays a huge impact on all health. So that was my straight away go to. I'm like, what can I do? Like, what about my diet? He's like, no, like, some people have some turmeric, but don't bother. I'm like, okay. So he wrote me a script for sulfasalazine, and I sat on that for probably 4 to 6 weeks, maybe a couple of months. And like, I really don't want to take the medication, because at this point I was, I just didn't want to be on medication. I truly believed that I would heal it naturally. Like I'd, in one sense, brainwashed myself for 2 years on plant-based, the benefits of a plant-based diet. And I'm like, if anyone can heal this naturally, I can. And if all these other people heal their chronic conditions naturally, then I definitely can. So I sat on this script, and I certainly wasn't getting any better, and I was probably getting a little bit worse. So I think one day I just said, I have to take this medication. So I went and filled the script at the pharmacy, and came back with a box of sulfasalazine, and took that for probably 2 months, and nothing happened. And I think I wasn't too keen on going back and seeing this guy, because I didn't really like if he was the so-called best rheumatologist in Melbourne, and that was the answer that he gave me, I'm like, well, I don't know whether I have all that much confidence in him. And at this point, I really didn't know anything else. So at some point along that, whether it was a couple of months later, I called him up and said, look, I'm not making any progress here. I need to try something else. So at that point, he wrote me a script for methotrexate. This is all very similar stories. I think I've heard this story many times on your podcast. Then on to methotrexate. And again, I sat on that for a couple of months, and probably at this point I was having my original doctor, the sports doctor, actually gave me a script for naproxen, the anti-inflammatory. So I had a couple of boxes of that, and I was sort of taking one of those every third day, every second day maybe, and I was getting like moderate relief, just enough to get around. By no means skipping around the place, like I was really hobbling, but it wasn't bearable, but it was bearable, if that makes sense. It was like it took the edge off it, and I just wasn't getting it better. So I ended up filling the script for methotrexate. And I remember the day that I took it, the first time I took it, and I'd heard so many horror stories about methotrexate from people on the podcast, and yourself, Clint, your experience on it. And I remember standing over it, and I do all sorts of weird and wacky stuff at times, and maybe a little superstitious, but I stood on top of it, and I put it in like the middle of my room, and I said some prayers over the top of it, and said, please heal my body, please don't harm my body, please heal it, and said some prayers and moved on and swallowed the tablet. And another month or two later, nothing happened. And I'm like, well, this is not working. I didn't have any side effects from the methotrexate. I guess that's the positive. I was probably on, I think I might have been on sort of 10 milligrams, I think it was. Nothing really happened. I wasn't feeling lethargic. I wasn't feeling tired. It was just nothing really happened to me. So the journey continued. This is probably, so the diagnosis was about September, October 2019. And this is probably, we're now at about probably around March, early 2020. March 2020, and this is just as lockdown happened. And by this point, I'd seen your podcast, Clint, and your TED Talk, and I was exploring the idea of transforming my diet. Like I was on a pretty good plant-based diet. It wasn't perfect, but I was certainly cooking with oils, and I would, have a little bit of, it wasn't a bad diet, but it wasn't as optimal as what it could be. And I think, across those couple of months, this is probably, late November, December, when I found your podcast, and three months later, I certainly, been looking at your stuff, and I just wasn't ready to jump onto your program. It just seemed like a monumental shift from what I was doing in my life. And, I'd eat out at cafes most days and go for coffee most days and just living a nice lifestyle. And then the idea of like stripping that all back and eating buckwheat and quinoa and sweet potato is like, it wasn't exactly ticking all that many boxes for me. And then COVID happened and lockdown happened. And I'm like, all the restaurants shut down. And I'm like, if I don't do it now, I never will. So I'm like, here we go. I just stopped eating everything that I was eating. And I had buckwheat and quinoa and sweet potato and leafy greens and mung bean sprouts, your favorite, and bunch of other things for probably about 3 months straight. That's all I ate. It's all I ate. And I was, when you describe me as a problem solver at the start, I'm probably a bit of a lazy problem solver because I couldn't be bothered going through the process of reintroducing foods. I'm like, this is all too hard. So I'll just stick to the buckwheat and quinoa. And I wasn't getting any better, but I wasn't getting any worse. I was still popping an anti-inflammatory every couple of days. And I had horrible, horrible, horrible days throughout that, sort of March to September, that entire sort of 4, 5, 6 months. It was diabolical. Like I would get up out of bed. Well, I wouldn't get up out of bed. I would wake up and I'm like, how am I going to get out of bed? And the idea of, just the idea of getting up out of bed and getting myself down to the bathroom to go to the toilet and have a shower. And it was just too hard. And I was like hanging onto furniture to get down. I couldn't walk. I couldn't bend my leg. It was just excruciatingly painful.
It was the knee, wasn't it? I mean, we haven't gone into...
My knee, my right knee. So
let us know where your joints were affected, which ones, yeah.
Yeah, so probably at that point, 90% was in my right knee.
Yeah.
I'd say, and the other 10% was in my right ankle. It had moved down. And we'll circle back to this point. Like it did move into my right ankle, and eventually, I think it moved into my right wrist and into my left elbow. And it was at that point where I thought I have to do something here because this is now spreading, and I've heard this can happen. And here I am here, I'm trying to do this all on my own without medication. I'm not listening to my doctors.
Hang on, weren't you on the methotrexate?
Yeah, but it wasn't doing anything. So right. The rheumatologist did tell me, he said I got 28 medications in there, and we've got to work our way up. So my understanding was I was on a lower dose of the lowest medication, which was methotrexate. That's kind of what he made me think. So I just wasn't going back to the rheumatologist because I deep down I didn't trust him. Like if, based on that original response that he gave me, that diet plays no impact in these sort of issues. I'm just going to turn the car on because I'm conscious that I don't want to go flat. So I just sat on it, and I think once it started spreading through my body more, I just remember I was hobbling around, but at least I had use of my arms. And when I woke up one morning and my wrist was gone, I'm like, oh my God, another one. And I'm like, now I can't. Like I remember the first day it happened, I couldn't turn the tap off, and I couldn't. I remember picking up my computer, just my laptop, and I couldn't pick my laptop up. I had to do it with two hands, and I just like, I'm in trouble here. I'm in trouble here. So I'm like, okay, it's time to do something about this. So I went and saw my GP. I got a GP for the first time in my life. I found a GP, and I wanted to build up a bit of a history because I'm like, I've got health problems now. I better start building up a team around me. I called the GP and told him what was happening, and he gave me a list of probably 5 rheumatologists. I told him the story with my previous rheumatologist, and I said, look, I need someone that's more open-minded than what he was. And he gave me a list of 5, and I remember I took that away. This was in lockdown. I drove straight to the beach down in Port Melbourne, where I was spending most of my days in lockdown. I was doing cold therapy. One of the things that I was trying, I was getting in the freezing cold bay, doing the Wim Hof stuff. And I sat there with the list, and I looked down the list, and one name stood out. His name was Daniel Lewis. I'm like, I reckon he might be my guy. So anyway, I jumped on my phone, Googled him, looked him up, Daniel Lewis, rheumatologist in St Kilda. And I landed on he had a web page, which is awesome. And on his web page, there was stuff about mindfulness and stuff about diet and stuff about like natural healing remedies. I'm like, oh my God, this is my man. I'm like, this is incredible. So I remember, like, within a split second, I jumped on the phone and I called, and the receptionist answered. Her name's Tina, and she was just lovely. And that was a massive shift from my previous rheumatologist, who was receptionist, was awful to me, awful. Made me feel guilty for ringing up with a question and, wouldn't put me through it. It was just a wholly negative experience. And she was wonderful. She was really, really nice. And I said, I'm pleading with you. I need to see Daniel. Like, I really want to see Daniel. And I rattled off everything like Daniel and I had in common. Like, I think he had some rum dust videos on there, and like all this sort of spiritual stuff. Some people might call it mumbo jumbo, but I like it. And I'm like, this is my man. I need to speak to this guy. And she said, all right, I'll squeeze you in. He was fully booked, but I think I told a compelling enough case to get squeezed in. And I went and saw him, and he was just wonderful, like just a really amazing guy. And he straight away referred me to a hypnotherapist, which was cool, like an very alternative therapy. I did a couple of sessions with this guy, and the idea was that he was trying to help me detach my mind from the pain. And I'd actually done a bit of work on this in the months before, so I didn't realise that's what I was doing, but I was actually doing that. I was like really trying to detach from, the pain of this disease and not get stuck in it. And he sent me to that guy. Like, I did 2 sessions. I wouldn't say it made all that much difference because I was already doing that stuff anyway. But I mean, these are all things that, we can circle back to this one again too. That these are all things that people should, we can try. Like, I mean, it's, there's so many stones to turn, and that was just another one I turned. And so Daniel, he just gave me so much confidence that I would heal. He said, he gave confidence in myself. He said, everyone's going to do it, you're going to do it. You're trying all these things. And, he said, well, what we need to do is we need to get you on 25 milligrams of methotrexate, and you need to start taking. I can't remember. I think I probably stopped taking it by that. I can't remember whether I stopped taking it or whether I took it all the way through. I can't quite remember that. But either way, it wasn't doing anything. So I went up to 25 milligrams of methotrexate, and I needed to be on that for 3 months before I was eligible for the next class of medication, which is the biologics. He had one in mind for me called Rinvoq, which I'm currently on now. And Rinvoq isn't apparently it's not a biologic, but it's in the family of biologics as it's described. It's called a JAK inhibitor, JAK inhibitor. And I had to be on 25 milligrams instead of methotrexate before I qualified for that. So I went up to that. I went to injectable methotrexate throughout it to see whether that would make a difference, because apparently the absorption rate might be a little higher. But again, that didn't make any difference. And actually what he did do was he put me on your favourite, everyone's favourite, prednisolone. Is that how you say it, prednisolone?
Oh, there's prednisone, and then there is prednisolone. So they're slightly different.
Okay, yeah. So I can't remember which one it was, but the non-steroid. No, it's steroid. I was on that, and I think he started me on 20 milligrams in the first week, and then 15 in the second, and 10 in the third, and 5 in the fourth week. And I think by the time I got to the fourth week, I was eligible to start on the Rinvoq. Okay. So I tapered off I tapered to 5 milligrams of prednisolone, or maybe it was 7.5. And he said, stay on that for a few more weeks after that. But I'll never forget it. The first day I took that Rinvoq, the very first tablet, within almost within a few hours, I'm like, whoa, this has done something. I felt really free, and I'm like, whoa, this is promising. And the next day I woke up and I'm like, I feel good. Like I feel really good. And like within a few days, I'm like, I don't think I need the prednisolone anymore. So I just completely stopped taking that from 7.5. I think I just stopped cold turkey. And from there, I honestly haven't looked back. Like I wake up pain-free every single day. I live a completely normal life, aside from the fact that I can't run the way I used to be able to run. I'm still only walking around, but it's like been completely life-changing. It's been incredible for me, absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Now,
so that's where I am today.
yeah. It's a very interesting, story, and I want to go through a bunch of questions that I got for you, but I also am mindful that we want to hear about your sort of lessons learned. Let's just quickly clear out a couple of questions I had. Was your knee still massively inflamed when you started the Rinvoq, and did it clear all that inflammation?
It was inflamed when I started the Rinvoq, but I think the prednisolone had brought it, like really helped a lot. So
that makes sense.
Once I got on the prednisolone, I was pretty good. Almost from the day that I started 20 milligrams of prednisolone, I was pretty good. Like that really knocked out 90% of the pain.
Yeah,
if not,
yeah. And then there was only a few days of overlap, and then you're able to stop the steroid completely.
Yeah.
Question number 2. Were you also able to cease using the methotrexate because of the new tablet?
Yep, I stopped using that straight away. I stopped using the methotrexate as soon as I started the Rinvoq. That wasn't necessarily the advice. He said stay on that, but I just didn't want to be on 2, and I felt as though I was okay. I was okay. Just being on the prednisolone, I was fine. When I say I was fine, I was much better. So I'm like, there's no point taking the methotrexate as well. So once I got the Rinvoq in, I stopped that.
And how long has it been? I could look this up myself, but how long has it been since you started the Rinvoq?
January. Start of January.
Okay, which is plenty of time also to have cleared methotrexate from your system, because as we're speaking today, it's the 10th of May. So that takes us through
about
January,
5 months.
February, March, April, May. So we're talking 4 months, right?
5 months, I think.
April,
start of Jan to the start of May, 5 months.
January, February, March, April, May. Around anyway, long enough.
We're in the 5th month now.
Yeah, it's 4 months. 4 months. Okay. Fantastic. So, okay, a couple more questions for you. What do you think triggered this? Because, you said you had a nice lifestyle, vegan lifestyle. You're doing Bikram all the time. It's just, I'm sure you've pondered many, many hours as to what's triggered it. In the science, it says it can be just an infection. We can get overgrowths of certain pathogens in our body that can trigger this. It can be a breakdown of the microbiome through, other reasons. But, have you thought back and looked at your early childhood, and were you not breastfed, and were you a cesarean birth, or did you take antibiotics for acne for a long period or for other reasons? Have you gone down that path and really searched for an answer here? Because it's very strange.
Yeah. So my mum has rheumatoid arthritis. That's the first thing. So that's the obvious one. So I think is it HLA-B27 or something like that, the gene that we carry?
Look, I'll be honest, and I'm not entirely sure, but you could be right. I just don't know. I haven't looked into genetics of it.
Yeah. So I think the original report said I carried this gene called HLA-B27, and if you carry that, you have to carry that to contract this illness, but it doesn't mean you're going to contract it. So I do carry that. My mum has rheumatoid arthritis. I took Roaccutane for acne when I was I actually took antibiotics for a period of time for acne throughout my teenage years.
There you go, brother.
Yeah.
We don't need to look any further.
Yeah, yeah. So I took that and the Roaccutane, which was a horrible drug. That was not pleasant. That was another acne drug. I don't know whether you know that one.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, that's like a real heavy one. That's probably like the prednisolone for acne.
Wow.
Yeah, people can go crazy on it. So yeah, I had that. I didn't take much medication. Like I've always been medication adverse. Like I would, I would only pop a pill like a paracetamol. If I really, really, really was sick. Like
but this is so similar to me, man. Hey, can you? Sorry, I just want to draw some real parallels here. Can you tell me how old you were? Like, how old are you now?
I'm 40. Just turned 40.
Okay, so if we wind back to sort of 38, when you were diagnosed, I was diagnosed at 31, but we have such a similar situation here because, the antibiotics as a teenager, I didn't have the genetic predisposition, as your mum, with my family haven't, none of my family knew what it was. And so, we completely underestimate the catastrophic impact of these teenage antibiotic use, because what happens is we then compound the damage that we do as a teenager with those antibiotics by then living a 20s lifestyle, the worst years of eating. When you're partying, you're drinking, some people are taking recreational drugs even, and then there's lack of sleep. Then there's, just everything associated with living a wild 20s, and you never recover because there's never a period of good eating to follow those antibiotics. And so it's taken you longer than what it did me to develop a health condition, a serious health condition. And maybe that's because you were living a more of a preventative lifestyle in your 30s with your plant-based diet, and you're going to Bikram all the time. And perhaps that actually prolonged what was on the cards. Now, that's just a guess. And then also, if your lifestyle was eating out a lot, as we continue just to look for a couple more answers before we move on, every meal you'll eat at a restaurant will have oil in it, unless it's like it'd be 1 in 1,000 restaurants meals would not have oil in it, unless it's just pure salad and maybe just a veggie salad, which no one will eat because there's no calories in it, because everything's cooked in oil. So you're taking in a lot of oil, probably not even aware of how much oil if you're eating out a lot. So I feel like I'm satisfied with my own curiosity as to how this came about, but doesn't mean, it just helps the mind trying to get some answers as to why. I can't tell you how much I hear about antibiotics as a teenager and the links to future problems. It should be outlawed.
Yeah. The other thing that I would add to that is something I've heard on a couple of your podcasts. Like throughout my 30s, I was mostly throughout my 30s, I worked insanely hard, like really long into the night hours, building businesses. I was just like intensely at it, And you're nodding your head. I've heard you talk about this as well, that this is a bit of a common factor as well with the people that, that get this.
Well, I can't say that I've identified a case where we've have a conversation like with yourself right now, where someone has said that just from that it has happened, but that is a stressor onto a stressed environment.
Sure. Okay.
It's just another stressor, isn't it? So first of all, you've wiped out a whole bunch of your Amazon rainforest by putting the bulldozers through with your antibiotics. And then you've never allowed any regrowth to occur for the next 10 years throughout the 20s. And I don't mean to imply that, you partied more than anyone else. I just, normally 20s are sort of a fun time. And then into the early 30s, you've just said that you've applied more stressor onto that. Sleep impacts the microbiome. Okay, so we've taken away a healing part of natural living. And then you've added stress on top of that, which also negatively impacts the microbiome. The studies on that are like amazingly powerfully impactful. So, it's a real negative impact on the microbiome. So if you've got that, even positive stress, like even in, positive related stress is still stress. It's still anxiety. It's still, and the late night. So, it's a good point that you've made. The 30s wouldn't have helped. You're not resting. You're not being, just living a balanced life, isn't it? Just the balanced life. We compare that to sort of regions of the world that still don't tend to get any inflammatory arthritis, where they rise by the sun still. Like I'm talking like sort of rural communities, the primitive living, where nothing's processed, everything's simple.
Yeah.
You go to bed because it's dark and you haven't got any lighting. There's still some communities where this is still happening and they don't have any traces of autoimmunity. So anyway, mate, thank you for answering all those questions for me. Hit me with a bunch of things that you've learned, things that you recommend people try that have worked for you. We've seen that you've tried a lot of medications and finally found one that's been transformative.
Yeah.
What else?
Okay. I wrote
down
a couple of things.
Was good.
Yeah. So I wrote down a couple of things. So like, I just have to say diet does make a difference. Like I'm probably different to most people. And I've heard a couple of people that were vegan when they contracted it on your podcast, but I think the majority, had more of a, like an animal-based diet with obviously varying degrees of, varying degrees of quality around their animal-based diet. But like I was mostly plant-based. But in the last couple of, like about a month ago, I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and she had a party at my place. She had about 6 or 8 girls over, and they loaded the house with sugar and chips, and volleys, and like all sorts of rubbish, biscuits, like all sorts of crap that I'd never ever buy or very seldom put into my body, because I just don't bring it into the house because I don't trust myself with it. And it was there, and like I ate my fair share of biscuits and chips and all the crap that they brought into the house, and I paid the price like for a couple of days. Like I could really feel like my joints weren't as good as what they were, even on this medication. So straight away there, it's just further confirmation that diet is essential. Exercise is the other thing. This is something that I think is probably, I underestimated it. So when I contracted this disease in the end of 2019, like I did kind of have this theory that I'll rest. And, it was kind of listening to you, emphasizing the importance of exercise, but I didn't actually take your medicine. I had the diet going well, but I wasn't actually exercising. And, it was just, it's an excuse, but it was too hard to exercise because I was too sore. But like there was things I could have done, but I wasn't doing it because I was too sore. This is all just part of it. But you say exercise is 50% of it and diet's the other 50, like lifestyle, exercise and lifestyle. And like, I just can't agree with that more. Like I would almost put exercise in front now in terms of where I'm at right now for me. Like I rode my bike from the day that I got the prednisolone, and it really took the edge off it and freed me up. Pretty much rode my bike almost every day for 4 months over summer. And I was sort of, just doing a little bit of resistance stuff, a little bit of weights most days, just like 10, 15, 20 minutes, not much, but just enough to keep some strength up. But I sort of stopped again. Like about a week ago, I started to get cold down here in Melbourne, and week and a half ago, and like I didn't ride my bike for 4 or 5 days, and I had a bit going on, and I could feel after 4 or 5 days of not doing my exercise, I could like my ankle got sore. My ankle became sore, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, it's back again. And I kind of knew that I didn't exercise, but I thought, no, it's like, like I had that in the back of my mind. But, you go straight to the fear center and it's like, oh my goodness, it's back. But I did something a little bit cheeky. I still had my prednisolone, a little box of that. I took 10 milligrams of that, and that took the inflammation out of my ankle. My knee was a little bit sore, but I just got back on my bike and I rode every day, and it's been like bit by bit by bit, it's gotten better each day, and it's awesome again now. It just reconfirms the importance of exercise. And I had a magnificent diet last year when I was doing your program. Like, I was eating so clean, but I wasn't exercising anywhere near it as much, and I wasn't getting the results. And you say it on the podcast, like, if you're not prepared to do the exercise, then don't expect the results. Just
yeah, the recording I did this morning, I interviewed TJ, a woman from Asheville, and the episode will likely come out just before this one. And she's just done the diet, not a lot of exercise, and she's noticed just profound. I mean, she's 95% perfect after just the exercise, but it's not, after just the diet. And while she says that she does do some exercise, it's not the extent that you and I are talking about here. Therapeutic exercise is getting the heart rate up. It's getting some sweating going if we can, at least a couple of times a week, so that we get that detoxification of heavy metals and pesticides.
Sure.
So yes, where I'm going with this is we if we're not seeing results, then what's missing? It's not the next supplement. It's not it's not whether or not Apple works in our diet or not. It's, can we get on a stationary bike and get a sweat up that day? That is going to shift the needle. That is going to be the answer. And if we can barely move, then move what we can. Get your neck moving. Become the best neck mover. And then if you can move your shoulders, get the shoulders into it. Some people dance. There's even a study, would you believe it, of people with rheumatoid arthritis who went through dancing for over several weeks and reduced their inflammatory markers. So I wouldn't imagine it would be like, so you think you can dance level, but it's going to be helpful for these individuals, whatever it might be. Move it.
And that brings me on to my next point, that you have to commit to trying everything. This is how I wrote it. You have to commit to trying everything, and everyone responds differently to different things. So that, the girl that you had on this morning, like, this is the thing that I've learned. Like, this is why this is so valuable. Like, your podcast is so valuable, because there's so many different ideas in there. And I just had this belief that I was going to heal, and that I would do whatever it took and try literally anything. Like, I would do anything to heal. And I was going to continue to try stuff until I found what worked. And I guess that's probably, that almost sits at the top. Like, if you want to heal naturally, I can't say I've healed naturally, but let's just talk about healing, because that's step one, healing, putting out the fire as you described. Like, if you want to heal, you have to just try stuff. Like, if it doesn't work, because it's so disheartening when you hear people on your podcast who overnight they change their diet and straight away all their symptoms vanish into thin air, and it's like, that didn't happen to me. And it would be really easy to give up then. But that is not the way, that is not the approach that I would recommend to anyone that wanted to heal. Like, it's just try everything. And like, I just tried so many things. Like, I tried so many things, and I continue to do everything. And I sent you an email. We're skipping ahead a little bit, but I sent you an email, or I put it in the forum a few weeks ago, that my CRP and my SED rate are 1. Is it 1? Did I say 1 or 0?
And then I'll bring that up. I'll bring that up while you keep talking.
1, whatever the lowest is. I don't know whether it's 1 or 0, but I think you said that you'd only seen that a couple of times in your
Here
whole
we go.
time?
I've found it. So your CRP is 1, and in Australia, for our international listeners, CRP of 1 in Australia means milligram per litre, not milligram per deciliter, as it often is in the United Kingdom. So that's very low. And it's probably as low as the measurement was taken, or you would have actually had a decimal place on that. My last measurement was 0.5, so it can be measured below.
Okay.
1. But here's the thing that you're referencing actually is the SED rate. So your SED rate is 1 millimeter per hour. Now, I've only think I've ever seen that like once or twice. I think that it cannot go lower because there actually has to be some separation of the blood. So there needs to be, gravity's pulling that apart, right? So I don't think you can go lower than that. Basically your blood markers are impeccable.
Yeah, and like I'm convinced that it's because I try everything and I still do a lot. Like I'm not reliant on this medication. I don't take it for granted at all. Like ever. Like I do not take it for granted that my health will be as it is. Like I've still got healing to do. Like I want to run again properly. I mean, there is so much room for growth for me. But I guess that's the thing. Just try as many things as you can and listen to as many podcasts as you can, and be in your community and share your story and read other people's stories, because there's just so much wisdom in there, and what works for one does not work for the others. So
let me just underline that point again about having to try everything. It's sort of under the category also of never giving up, and just continuing to search until you find something that works. And sometimes I get this email. I would get this email once a week from someone, and it would be, "Hi Clint, I've watched your information online. I'm decided to try your program because it's my last hope. This is it for me. If this doesn't work, I've got nothing left." Now, I have this feeling when I read that, like, it's just the wrong approach to go into this, because it's almost like this part of this program is almost the mindset shift that you have to continue to explore on your own almost. It's, yes, the diet's there. Yes, all of the exercise options are there, mindset, stress reduction, supplements, how to manage your medications and so on. So it's there, but there's almost an infinite level of things that you can try, to the level of like you've done. If that medication don't work, then try the next, because then once you get your inflammation under control, then the diet and then the other lifestyle changes can actually have much more impact. And until then, if you're highly inflamed like you were with your knee, when you're really inflamed, that self-cycles, that inflammation is coexistent with gut inflammation, which then creates more leaky gut. You've got this cycling effect. Oxidative stress is through the roof because your immune system's engaged, which generates free radicals. So the whole thing needs to be brought back into alignment for those natural things to have impact. And so, when I hear, I'm going to try this, if this is it, then I'm giving up and that's it. No, we should never think like that. Never. There's always a way to improve. No matter how bad we are, there's always another step that can bring us a little closer to being better.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So what's your next point? These are fantastic.
Well, the next point was on mindset. So you've just pretty much said it. I'll just restate in my own words. Like I never doubted, and I still don't doubt, that I'll be running another ultra marathon in the wilderness at some point down the track. Like I walk around, without pain. I get up every morning and I'm not stiff. All of these, like I have the quality of life back, but I still can't run. I still can't run the way I can't run properly at all, really. Like I did a run on the beach the other day. I ended up getting up to 4Ks. I texted you about that. I got 4Ks worth of distance on the beach, but I did pull up a bit sore after that, and maybe I went a little bit too far. But like I just don't doubt. I don't doubt that I will heal, because I've heard so many people on your podcast that are healing, and so many stories where it's taken years. So many stories where it's taken years, and these people don't give up, and they're still going, and then they heal, 3, 4, 5 years down the track. And I'm like, I'm at 18 months. Like, yeah, I used to dream. I would dream 3 or 4 nights a week of actually running. Like, the dreams were so vivid that I'd wake up and I'm like, I ran. And I'm like, oh no, that was a dream. Damn, it was just a dream, that one. But like, I'm so fixated on this idea of getting out and running again, and just being able to, because I ran my whole life. Like, I always ran, and that was taken off me. And I don't have anything to complain about anymore. If I don't run again, that's fine, because I have amazing quality of life now. But I think the mindset is everything, because if your mind is in the right spot, like if your mind truly believes that, you will keep turning over stones until you find what works for you. I think that's the key. Like, there is no give up. Like, there's no such, it doesn't even enter your mind. It's like, it's going to happen. It's just a case of when. And that's all you can do. Like, you can't do anything else apart from that if you want to heal, because everyone's journey is different. Everyone's timeline's different.
That's right. It becomes a healthy obsession. Or if your partner is involved, maybe they'd call it an unhealthy obsession, because they can't quite comprehend how obsessed we become about it. But, this may not be as relevant to other people, but for you specifically, go and follow the work and check out John McLean. He spent many, many years in a wheelchair, and my friend Cameron does all the video editing for all of his triathlons and all this stuff that he does in a wheelchair. He competes in a wheelchair. And technology now has assisted him with his own incredible mindset and determination to try and get him walking again, and to try and he hopes to run. And this is happening. This is like defying even modern science. And so I just brought up his website. It's johnmclean.com.au. So go and check it out. If you want to look at someone who's in a more of a defying the odds situation, go and check it out, man. I think you'll find that inspirational.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I shall. The next point I wrote down was get a great doctor who believes you can heal naturally. I just can't. You really need a team behind you that believes in you, because that will tie back into your mindset. Because if your doctors don't believe it, it's going to be very difficult for you to believe it. Eventually, you'll get whittled away. So you've got to surround yourself with people who do believe. Like, I cannot emphasize that enough. Just keep going through rheumatologists until you find one who talks your language. And if you're in Australia, called Daniel Lewis. And we've got telehealth now here, so you can probably call him from any state in the country. So that's my point on that.
Has he got? Point, did he outright say that he believes there's an opportunity for you to one day need less or no medications to manage your condition, or did he not go as far as that?
He's just let's see. He said, yeah, it's possible, but I'm not looking too far into the future for that. Like, I'm trying to rebuild strength in my leg, trying to rebuild my calf muscle, which disintegrated away to nothing. And I'm just enjoying quality of life. So, like, for me, there's no side effects on this medication. I'm okay to be on it, and I'm anti medication by default. Like, I don't want to be on medication, but I think that that was another point I wrote in there. I don't know whether I said don't wait too long to take medication. I think that it's okay to, if I had my time again, I can only speak for myself, but if I had my time again, I probably wouldn't do it any differently. I tried my best to heal naturally without medication. It didn't work. if I got on medication quicker, maybe it wouldn't have spread into these other parts. Who knows? But I tried, and I can live with that I did try. But I would be reluctant. I wouldn't advise anyone to not take medication, because you might just find that you get all your quality of life back. And for me, it was also an ego thing. Like, it was very much tied into my ego that I was going to be able to heal naturally, and that, you know, I was a really healthy guy, and that, you know, I was plant-based, and, you know, this is not going to be my lot, and I'll be able to do all this naturally because I'm, you know, I'll just work it out. And I resisted a lot. If I'm to be honest, I resisted a lot for that. So, like, you know, again, it's all like just part of the reflection. But I wouldn't do it too much differently. I think the timeline was pretty good. But yeah, just a little note in there, like, some people are very stubborn with their medication. I was one, but don't cut off your nose to spite your face, as they say. Sometimes
that's you know, again, more parallelisms between you and I. I waited 12 months before going on methotrexate. My symptoms were absolutely extraordinarily bad. So elbows, wrists, ankles, fingers, left knee, feet, jaw, chest, in the chest area. I mean, I was in a nightmare before I started methotrexate after just 1 year. And that shouldn't have been as long as it was, and was on methotrexate 3.5 years. And without that, goodness knows how bad. That's like wheelchair stuff. So, yeah. So couldn't agree more on that. Don't postpone. If you're not winning the battle and you're trying everything, then just straight up.
You had a great analogy. You had a great analogy that really stuck with me. The analogy around your house being on fire. So I think by the time I finally listened to my doctors, my house was on fire, and by trying to combat it it was an inferno, and by trying to combat it with diet alone and maybe a little bit of exercise, but not much, it was like trying to put it out with buckets of water, and it just wasn't going to happen. Yeah. That stuck out. I think you said that somewhere along the line, and that really stuck out. Like, I was probably trying to put it out with buckets of water for that whole year.
Yeah, and just to enjoy exploring that metaphor a bit more, I think if we were eating a poor diet and not exercising, then that's basically throwing gasoline on the fire. So at least you were throwing buckets of water, but they were too small to combat the big flames. Can you tell me, what was I going to ask? One more thing about the medication. Because you mentioned having the right rheumatologist. Do you find it curious that he had this Rinvoq in mind for you when he put you on methotrexate, as though it was going to be the drug he wanted to put you on in due course if methotrexate didn't work? Because I must say, it's not one that comes up that much in discussions. And so could you speak to that, whether it be something that he is particularly passionate about as a medication, without wanting to put words in his mouth, of course, but just your feeling on that, and also or more of a new release sort of drug?
It is, yeah. He describes it as the new kid on the block. That's his words. And I think I don't know how many people he gives it to, or whether I don't know which boxes I tick to get it, but he describes it as the new kid on the block, and he's getting great results with it. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people will be paying attention to that aspect of our conversation today, and asking their rheumatologist about it. The attractiveness of being able to take a pill as opposed to inject. I think that's highly appealing. Like biologic drugs, they're just seeming to be more and more. And I know you said it's sort of quasi-biologic, but these immune modulating drugs, immunosuppressants, this technology, I do feel will one day become the norm, as opposed to the graduation place that we're heading towards after we fail all of the, as some other rheumatologists put it, no, I won't quote that, but some of the more cheaper drugs, the sulfasalazine, the methotrexate, stuff that's been around for decades and decades. So I wanted to find out about that drug as well, because I think a lot of people will be interested about that.
Sure. Yeah.
So thanks, mate. Get us back on track, and then we'll close this one out.
Yeah. I was just going to say, getting support. Like, if you're listening to this podcast, this is a shout out to you and your group, Clint. If you're not in the group, I would definitely recommend getting in the group, because the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And it's just little things. Like, I started off I was about 70 kilos on March 20, when I officially started your program. And I dropped down to 61 kilos in about a month. So I dropped 9 kilos really quickly. Luckily, we were all locked down, and not that many people saw me, because a lot of people would have been pretty worried about me. And I know you've talked about that as well. But there's just little things like, you think that someone my age who's exercised most of their life would make the connection that if you don't do weights and put resistance on your body, that you won't put the weight back on. And it's like, you said somewhere in there, like do some weights. Like, I wanted to put the weight back on. It's like, do some weights. Oh, that's a good idea. So it's just like, I don't know. I think because like your whole reality's basically shut itself, and it's like the whole playbook that you've lived your whole life has gone out the window, and it's like you're dealing with this whole nother way of living. And it's like everything that used to work no longer works. So when it used to, you want to put on some weight, and I find it very difficult, like you, to put on weight. Very, very difficult. I'm like, I just didn't really make the connection that I should be doing weights. And the other thing you said to do was drink a lot of orange juice. And like, the weights one is obvious, but some reason I didn't figure that out. But the orange juice, you said drink orange juice because I think it's calorie dense. Is that what it is? But anyway, I just started drinking lots and lots of orange juice after every meal, and my weight started going straight back on. Like, within the course of probably 2 or 3 months, I was back up to sort of, mid 65, 66, 67, and I'm back up. I'm actually about 71 now. So like, I'm slightly above the weight that I started at just over 12 months ago. So it's tiny. These are obviously just tiny little things, but without being in that group, I wouldn't have found out these things. I mean, the weights one is like, that's obvious. Like, but because like your mind is going in so many different directions, sometimes you do miss the obvious, and you probably see this a lot. Like, for you that sees so many people, so many different experiences, you can like really see, probably really see some things that we can't, because we're just too close to it. And then more obscure things like, I don't know whether everyone will get orange juice. To me, that's not like super obvious. And even so, like, even if it was, like, I didn't know whether I could actually have orange juice because, like, I was on this baseline diet. So it's little things like that. They're just 2 examples that I wrote down. There's probably a couple more, but I guess coming back to the other point I made, everyone's circumstance is different. So like, they were the 2 things for me that helped me get my weight back up in that instance. But everyone's got a different situation, and it's got to get, like, if you're committed to healing, spend the few $100s a year it costs and ask as many questions as you want, because it's a heck of a lot cheaper than going to a rheumatologist.
Oh, here. Well said. And just putting some context around that orange juice recommendation, and also the weight situation. Keep in mind, as people listening to this, these are recommendations based on your specific circumstances, based on other feedback that you'd provided about your tolerability to certain things. So these aren't blanket recommendations to everyone to go and start drinking orange juice. There are certain circumstances where it's a good idea, and there are certain circumstances where it's best to make a different intervention. But in your case, that was a very, very, that was a calculated suggestion, and it's proved good. So thank you, mate. These are sensational things. And yes, thank you for that shout out to our support group. I cannot think of a better place in the world that someone should be if they have inflammatory arthritis. And that's just a truthful statement. And as you said, it's a few $100 a year, but if that saves you, gosh, it can improve your life so much. I think it's a good investment, and it just reflects the time and attention and care that myself and the other people who are in there acting as coaches put into helping everyone. And Yeah, thanks for that, and appreciate it. So, mate, really interesting stuff. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? We've given people a lot of great information, and I hope people have really enjoyed these insights. But is there anything that's sort of seemingly missing here?
I would just like to say, probably just to the last thing I would like to say is that there were days when there were many, many, many days last year when I would get up and I'd get myself down to the shower and I would get myself dressed, and that felt like my day was done, like I was exhausted. And I'd flop on my couch and I'd lie there, and there were days where I'm like, if this is what my life is going to be for the next 40 years, there's no point being here. Like, this is insane. Like, it's not even worth. This is not a quality of life. And I know that so many people get like, it's a horrible. It's probably not the worst disease you can have, but it's there's probably always someone worse off. But it's not a great one. Yeah, and I just remember those days where I'm like, there is no point being alive. But what I did was I gifted myself just the tiniest little bit of space to believe that whatever was happening to me now was happening for a reason, and that it needed to happen. And that whilst I couldn't see that reason right now, I trusted that I trusted the universe, and I trusted what was being given to me. I have more than enough evidence to suggest that the universe knows what's right for me. And I just let go, and I gave that tiny little bit of space that it's okay, and that it's like everything is perfect as it is right now, even in those darkest times. And yes, I'd sink for an hour and I'd lie there, and sometimes I would cry. I would bawl my eyes out, just, at home on my own with intense pain and seemingly no prospects to recover. And just that tiny little bit of space gave me that glimmer of hope to start crawling myself back out of that hole. And, I guess the thing I'm most proud of is that whilst I went through those incredibly difficult times, I never got stuck in the hole because of that, because I gifted myself that space just to believe that it's okay. Like, this is happening for a reason, and there's something to be learned. And I learned so much. Like, I value my health so much now. I'm so much healthier than what I was pre-arthritis. I don't have the body movement that I did have, but I'm healthier. I'm far more grateful for a body that works really well. Doesn't work perfectly, but it works really well. And given that I'd had my health taken away from me, like, it's not a bad thing that it happened, because now I have the perspective that health doesn't last forever. And if I don't do everything right today, and in my age now, where I'm 40, and there's people that are older and people younger, but we're all in the same position. Like, if you don't do what's right for you today, then somewhere along the line you might pay the price down the track. And it was almost like one of the things that came out. It was a wake up call to say, hey, like, health is valuable. Health is the most important thing, and it is almost the most important thing. Like, nothing else really matters. Like, if you don't have your health, it's very, very difficult to have a great quality of life. And I have been gifted everything that I could ever wish for in this existence, and my health was taken away, and that was the only thing now that, like, that's the thing that I really value the most now. So having put that in perspective, it's just so worth fighting for. And I just really hope that anyone that might be listening to this that's in a world of pain, and I know people have it worse than me, but at the same time, there's always someone worse than you as well. And you just have to believe that it's possible, and you have to give yourself that little bit of space, and also understand that everything, no matter what's happening right now, in your situation. It's perfect as it is right now. It's okay.
Yeah, I love it, mate. Beautiful words. Very, very beautiful words. So thank you. Thank you for those final thoughts, because I think that encapsulates a position that so many of us are in or have been in, and are dealing with. And just to know that, you have experienced all that, been in those challenging times, and still allowed yourself, as you said, that little permission to imagine a better time, and that better time has come. So thank you for sharing everything that you've learnt with us. It's been a busy 18 months for you, these last 18 months. Goodness me, all the ups and downs and challenges and things you've learnt, quite extraordinary. And I hope everyone today has found this valuable. So thanks, Rich. And I look forward to keeping up this the next chapter of your journey online.
And just finally, Clint, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being so generous with changing the course of your reality to bring this program to life. I know you had a lot going on, and you do some incredible things. I heard your podcast with Simon Hill. That's where I found you, the Plant Proof podcast, and your story is incredible, and it's just such a generous thing that you do. It's a very, very generous thing that you do to give hope to all of us out here that have suffered or are suffering, and the world's a better place because you're doing what you do for people like us. So thank you, Clint.
Oh, mate, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Well, we've had a wonderful time, and I'm going to let you go now. I know you've got a flight you have to organise at some point soon. You're on the road traveling, so thanks so much. And as I said, we'll speak online, and appreciate all your time.
Thanks, Clint.